Welcome to the audience. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's session, 2 years of Principles for Responsible Banking implementation, as part of the UNIBFI 2021 Regional Roundtable for Europe. The Principles for Responsible Banking, they're the global framework to enable banks to align themselves with the targets as they are set out in the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and the Paris Climate Agreement. They have now been in place for more than 2 years, launched in September 2019, has grown to represent close to half of the global banking system by assets, and to a membership of currently 260 banks. So together, those banks, those signatory banks, they have been developing tools to support effective implementation of the principles. With these at hand, with these tools, guidance materials, methodologies, and all of that at hand, the banks are assessing and measuring the impact, which is actually at the core of the principles framework and one of the 3 key steps of implementation of the principles. That impact analysis is then also the prerequisite for the second key step of implementation, which is target setting. Now, of course, these steps analyze a bank's impact and then set targets in the most significant impact areas. That is not an easy task, and it requires considerable work to build capacity and also understanding around that. In this session, we would like to discuss the experiences of PRB signatories and also understand more about the steps they have undertaken in order to implement the PRB. We'll also touch upon some areas that are highly relevant for the majority of banks, namely climate change, but also financial inclusion, but also areas that are still more nascent, but increasingly important on banks' agendas, such as biodiversity or circular economy. We will hear today from banks that have already progressed on the PRB implementation journey. All of the four of them together with me on the panel here today being founding signatories of the principles, namely ING, BNP Paribas, NatWest, and Intesa Sao Paulo. My name is Johanna Dichter. I'm responsible for implementation support within the banking team at UNIBFI, and I will moderate today's session. But of course, I'm not alone. So let me kick off by introducing the panel and my 4 fellow panelists. Let me welcome, first of all, Jennifer Coleman, who's the Social Policy and Engagement Lead Sustainable Banking at NatWest. She has been working for the bank since 2007 and also had different functions prior to her current role within the bank. We also have Nathalie Joubert, who's the Group Corporate Social Responsibility Deputy Head at BNP Paribas. She's joined the CSR department at BNP in 2010 and has been deputy head since 2014, leading a team of 30 persons who are in charge of several things, amongst them promoting environmental and social dimensions in risk analysis and banking products. We also have on the panel today Ambika Jindal, who's the Global Lead Climate and Wholesale Banking Group Sustainability at ING Bank. Ambika leads the ING's climate action work and the integration of all relevant sustainability topics into ING's wholesale banking business. And last but not least, please welcome with me Anna Monticelli, who's the head circular economy desk at the Intesa Sao Paulo Innovation Center, where she's been working since 2015. That Innovation Center is a group company dedicated to innovation, and they provide specialist support in analyzing innovative projects of companies and startups in the circular economy area. So thanks to the 4 of you for being on that panel together with me. Let me get started by asking each and every one of you a couple of questions around your implementation journey experiences. All the 4 of you, as I said, are founding signatories of the PRB and therefore can look back to more than 2 years of implementation. So can you please share some experiences from within your bank of how implementation has been going for you? Maybe let's get started with Nathalie.
Yes, hello. So for us, PRB has been both something very new, but also something coming in the story of the sustainability for the bank. We have been founding members because we have been working on SDG, climate change issue for quite a long time. And after 2 years in the PRB, I guess that the main lessons that it gives us more confidence and more strength in implementing new policies and new challenges. Maybe I try to elaborate a bit. PRB arrived at a time where within the bank, people were quite convinced that SDG, climate change, social inclusion were key areas. But what we were missing maybe is tools to be able to explain what we were doing, explain that in a comparable way, be able to look at the others and really understand whether doing things better than us, did they have ideas we didn't have, how can we build on that? So PRB were very helpful to that, and it gave us really a momentum internally. What was very interesting is that we are an international bank in around 70 countries, and we sometimes have subsidiaries in other countries outside Europe, for example, saying, okay, we saw that the leading banks in our country are PIB members, we are PIB members, so we can benchmark ourselves on what they are doing locally. So I think this was a very interesting and, to be honest, a bit unexpected from my side advantage of joining the PRB. Not only it was something really at the head office level, which helped us to implement our policy worldwide, but also it gives locally ideas to branches to implement on their own key focus area what the PRB could be for themselves.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Maybe I'll just pass the question about your experiences to the next panelist. Ambika, what can you say about your experiences so far, also adding to Natalie's points?
Yeah, thanks, Joanna, and thank you everyone for having us here. We're very happy to be a part of this group here, but also the group of PRB in general. I have to say, I think our experiences are very similar to what Natalie just outlined. You know, we are a bank who's been working on this for a long time. I can assume that the founding banks were banks who, you know, it wasn't the first time that they started working on climate or other topics because of the PRB. But what the PRB has managed to do is really give us a common language, you know, a way to talk about this, which is important. Now we relate with each other. You know, we don't have to come up with our own differentiating language. And, you know, sometimes banks get into that kind of mentality, as do, you know, many others. You know, how do we call this something that people can understand? But now PRB has taken that responsibility on, and, you know, everybody is made to understand. We can speak in a language that all of us can relate with. I also hear that investors and rating agencies are going to use PRB as a de facto framework to assess banks, and that gives it a lot more strength, a lot more power, allowing us all to sort of focus together. And this also really helps in shaping collective agreements, which is really the direction ING has been wanting to go. You know, it's not about one bank trying to create impact. The impact really is when a lot of us come together like we do here, and try to do something together, and we measure it, and we talk about the dilemmas, and we talk about methodologies and tools, and that only works when you have a collective goal. So we are really happy with that kind of, you know, approach that is being taken. So we of course have signed up to the Net Zero Banking Alliance. We want to sign up to a collective agreement for financial health, for biodiversity, all of these topics. I think the PRB has really given us a very good framework. Another point, actually very similar to what Natalie said, you know, we could be very Europe-centric again, because most of the founding banks, let's say here, are Europe-centric sometimes. But this gives us a global focus. You know, it also shares with us what's happening in other parts of the bank of the world. What are other banks facing? And that's a really good and eye-opening thing to know, because, you know, we do have businesses and clients in those areas of the world, and it's important for us to understand it. I think the last really valuable thing that I wanted to point out was finding the right partners. You know, like with UNEP, we've been able to find RMI, the Rocky Mountain Institute. These kinds of, you know, experts and partners are brought to the table, and they can work with a whole bunch of banks, again, helping us to have industry-led movements, to have agreements and approaches that are really founded together. So for all of those reasons, our experience has been nothing but positive, actually, in trying to implement the principles for responsible banking. They're guidelines. They don't really, you know, it's not that we make them the action plan. We then develop action plans in our own ways. but having those common guidelines has given us a very good head start, I would say, as the group of banks who've signed up. So yeah, appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Mbeka. I would pass to the next of you, to Jennifer from NetWest. Maybe can you share some of your insights of the last 2 years and underneath the PRB umbrella framework?
Yeah, no, thank you, Johanna, and thank you for having us on this panel. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to go back to the start really of PRB. It was really great timing for us. It's September 2019. We were about to get a new CEO, Alison Rose, and we were changing our purpose. We were looking at our wider societal and environmental purpose, and defining the kind of the words around that and the ambition around it. And it really helped guide our strategy setting at that time. We were able to, we launched our purpose, which is to champion potential of people, families and businesses, and really helping them to thrive. And the 3 strategic focus areas that we put in place were around tackling climate change, supporting enterprise, but specifically around female entrepreneurship, Black and ethnic minorities, and those areas outside of the big cities like London. We really want to see the growth and the potential that those entrepreneurs have. And the third area was around learning, and that's not just learning, it's learning as an organization. We take on a very strong learning culture, but also about supporting people in our customer base and our communities with their financial capability as well. So the PRB gave us a real opportunity to try and map and align those strategic focus areas to the Sustainable Development Goals. And we were able to highlight 7 Sustainable Development Goals where we strive to have a real positive impact and put that into our strategy from the beginning. It also, through climate change, obviously, we were very clear that we want to try and do whatever it will take to align with Paris Climate Agreement, and we want to be a leading UK bank, and we're very delighted to be the banking sponsor of COP26, during which this event is taking place. So, we were able to kind of really assert our ambition using the principles for responsible banking. And then the 6 principles themselves, really spoke to the how you implement strategy and how you create that, whether it's about understanding impacts and target setting, working with stakeholders, working with clients, getting this embedded into governance and culture, and then increasingly, as we all know that we have to do, be more transparent, get more reported, and bring that out to the forefront. So it really, it was a framework that could help us throughout the whole of our strategy implementation from day one. So that was really great, and we've therefore benefited from much of the guidance and the working groups that have come about. And we're very active with the Principles for Responsible Banking working groups. We were on the Gender Equality working group, the Financial Inclusion and Financial Health, Biodiversity. We signed up to the Collective Commitment on Climate Action, and the Portfolio Impact Analysis tool as well. We were very keen to stay close to that, so that we could use the insight from that when we piloted and developed the tool internally ourselves, which is something that we've been working on this year. We have done an initial assessment using the tool, and that's been really helpful in supporting kind of other internal assessments that we've been doing alongside materiality and strategic insights. And it helps both validate our own findings, but also points us to emerging issues and areas that we need to focus more on as well. So yeah, we've been delighted to be part of everything you've had to offer, and the offerings have been great so far. So thank you.
Thanks, Jen. I would pass over to the 4th bank, to Anna and Intesa Sao Paulo. Maybe you can tell the audience a bit about your experiences of the last 2 years PRB implementation.
Thank you, Johanna. Yes, of course, also for Intesa San Paolo, PRB is a very useful framework, powerful in order to explain what we have already done, what was included already in the business plan, master plan that is going to the end this month. We have, of course, always put in place SDGs in practice, but also other international principles like UNEP-FI, or we are respondent to all the questionnaire and the indexes. So we are we usually tried in the last year to create to collect data to have to put in place new strategies connected to SDGs and Paris Agreement, etc. But what PRB are able to create in our framework is a new way of reporting activities, the opportunities and the stimulus to set targets. And in this case, we have we have many areas where important targets have to be implemented, have to be set, and then implementing, considering internal activities, for example, our environmental and climate change action plan, where we set all the medium to long-term targets connected to our internal and direct impacts on climate change, but also and all the targets connected to the way we fund and we support our clients. So the importance to be able to report and create a sort of representation of our activities connected to stakeholder engagement and training, internal but also external, so the diffusion of culture. We know that we could be a very important player in promoting climate change culture, information about how companies but also families could transform their activities and how they can change the way of consume, the way of buying, of choosing what they are buying. And so all these aspects are very important for us, and it's important to be able to communicate this kind of targets, to be able to measure the impact that the bank and the clients could have in this, in all this kind of principles, and so try to generate a sort of leverage on what we are doing, considering all the community and all the environment where we are working.
Thank you so much, Anna. Very, very important points that all of you are raising here. And what I heard a couple of times is, of course, the word climate change, which I know that all of you have very high on your agenda, and which, as is not surprising, is the impact area that the vast majority of PB signatories have identified as one of the most significant ones. We have recently published a report called the Collective Progress Report that actually analyzes how much progress has been made in the last 2 years amongst the PB signatory group, and 87% of our PB signatories said they have climate as one of the most important impact areas. So let's maybe look a bit onto at the different impact areas, starting with climate. Ambika, ING is among the banks with a very ambitious climate agenda, amongst other banks as well, of course, and has also recently joined the Net Zero Banking Alliance, the NISBA. So the question is, how is your organization responding to climate change, and where actually are your main impacts on climate change?
For us, climate has been on the agenda, like I said, for a long time. Joining NZBA was actually strengthening the commitment we had before. We had signed up to the Paris Alignment commitment, of course, which was to be well below 2 degrees by 2070. Net zero takes this one step further and says, okay, you have to be 1.5 degrees by 2050. And that was a stronger step to take. It also asks for intermediate targets. So it's not just about, looking at 2050, but you really need to start thinking about your shorter term targets, all of which appeals to us very much in trying to make this more alive. I think these strategic sort of collective agreements make these principles come to life. So that was really, really a good example of that. The integrated climate approach that we prepared our report on, you might have seen this, it's a very large technical report, but essentially what we're trying to say there is, instead of showing how we deal with climate in bits and pieces, we pulled all of our climate actions together and published one report that tells us exactly what we're doing. And this integrates 4 more impact, let's say, areas that we find our climate actions have most efforts in. First is, of course, managing our own footprint. We need to make sure that our own operations are not causing, causing any problems, and that we are actually giving back more than we take. That is one part of it. Of course, that's not the largest part of it, because as a bank, we all know that our footprint is not really us, but it's more what we do with our clients. So we need to make sure that we manage the risks that we have through our clients and their businesses, but also manage the risks that climate has on our business. So it's, inward looking and outward looking. We also need to make sure that we are steering our operations towards net zero. So these are looking at future pathways, not just backward looking, but forward looking, and saying, okay, where do we want to be by 2050? And therefore, what steps do we have to take in the meanwhile? And last, is we are a very inclusive bank. We try very hard to transition with the clients we have today. So perform while transforming. And we feel that that inclusive approach is what helps us to transition the finance. We want to see our clients go in a certain direction. And by staying with them and making sure that they start focusing on the activities that take them closer to net zero by 2050, that is a far more impactful thing to do than to divest and sort of say, okay, I'm not going to do anything about this. I'm just going to walk away. So that's also important, that we fund the transition, we find new solutions, we do sustainable transactions of all kinds. And that's, so those 4 pillars sort of really come together in our integrated climate strategy. We're now working on the net zero pathways. This is still a process to take. How do you get there? We did come up with already a target for our oil and gas portfolio. Of course, that's the one that is watched and is important. So we have already strengthened our target to 12% by 2025. We're going to reduce our funding to upstream oil and gas by 12% by 2025. And that supersedes our target of we're going to only reduce by 19% by 2040. So that was our previous target, and now we've made it stronger to 12% by 2025. This also helps us to sort of, again, come take the target closer to you and not keep it so far away, and look at it and start working on it now. We want to start reducing our exposure to certain types of energy, but also start steering towards more cleaner energy types, right? So you want to start doing more and more of clean energy, but also start doing less carbon intensive stuff. That's also very important for us. The 9 sectors that we're looking at, where we have Terra is our approach for climate. We are on track for 5 of them. I can name them. It's power generation, automotive, residential, real estate, shipping, and fossil fuel. There are other 3 sectors where we are within 5% of the scenario that we had. So that's steel, cement, and commercial real estate. But we are confident that we can bring this in alignment, as the time passes. And aviation comes out way above the pathway. But this is because COVID has caused a lot of changes to how we measure our impact on aviation. I think what's important with all of these sectors is that we are trying to do sector-specific targets. So we're not trying to apply one metric to all. We're really trying to see what targets matter, what kinds of metrics should we be measuring that make it meaningful to steer that particular sector. A nice trend that we also see is that it's moving towards more industry-led targets. So you're not trying to come up with these in the back with some academic institution. You're actually working with industry. So if you see net zero steel, we've signed up for the net zero steel initiative. We've also signed up for Poseidon. So net zero steel is obviously for steel. Poseidon principles is for shipping. These are hard to abate sectors that we are looking at and saying, okay, what needs to be done, and we're working with the key players who have to make this transition so that we can make sure that we actually reach the end of where we want to go. Climate risk, as I had mentioned, is also a super important area where we see regulatory pressure really stepping up. There's a lot more that banks need to do. It's beyond stress testing, but also looking at what are the hotspots in your portfolio, understanding heat maps, as they call it, to understand where you have to take action. We're doing that. We're making sure that we can actually be prepared for regulatory asks. We're looking at physical and transition risks in our portfolio. Physical risks being floods, catastrophes, fires, droughts, things like this. Transition risks being regulation risks, changes of technology. So if we are active in the automotive sector, what if everybody moves to battery? What happens to us then? So we're really trying to, measure, but also make it relevant and material to understand what are we going to do to prepare ourselves for the future, but also prepare our clients for the future. So overall, these are some of the steps that NZBA is helping us. Again, it's a pleasure to work with many banks in that group. We've recently had a discussion. I mean, COP is great and you have a really lot of high-level discussions there, but I actually found that simple discussion with about, I think, 40 banks that were present super enlightening, because everybody presents what they're doing, their approach, how they implement it, and that's where the crux is. So that has really been going very well for us, and we really look forward to working with the banks and coming up with an approach.
Thank you so much, Ambika. Very broad topic, very interesting. There's a lot more aspects that we will cover, but it's, I'm afraid, a bit out of scope of this session. By the way, the NISBA has recently grown to almost 90 banks. So during COP, there was a massive, let's say, expansion about NISBA banks as well. Maybe let's get to another impact area that is very prominent among the PRB banks. About half of the PRB banks focus on that, and that is financial inclusion, including health. So financial health, including financial inclusion, that covers a broad range of social aspects that are relevant for banks. Jennifer, NatWest, can you describe what your approach at NatWest on financial inclusion actually looks like, and what aspects of health or inclusion you are planning to tackle or actually are already tackling?
Thank you. Thanks, Johanna. Yes, no, I agree. We were on the financial inclusion and financial health subgroup, and you know, I agree that the challenges are very broad across the globe, and you know, and very different as well. They look very different in different countries and for different banks, and even sometimes agreeing on the terminology and the scope is very challenging and very difficult. As a predominantly UK bank, you know, we really are focusing, as I say, in line with our purpose to help champion potential and help people thrive. And in order to do that, we need to start tackling the barriers to financial health. And this includes looking at access to finance, preventing financial difficulties or dealing with financial difficulties, and helping our customers with the threats posed by fraud and scams as well. So really, for our approach to financial inclusion, it includes providing basic bank accounts, of which we had over 600,000 at the end of 2020. And we work with prison and migration services and a whole number of services out there to ensure that we can help get people banked and into the system, and then start to build a credit score to get it further on into the banking. But of course, those products are free and available for them to use. We also really focus on supporting customers in vulnerable situations. We have a dedicated team, and we have community bankers, which is quite unique. These are people in the community working with people day in, day out, and they can help them when they're in really vulnerable situations, like supporting them through domestic abuse situations, through gambling addictions. And we work with third parties and partners to help specialise our support and train our people in those areas. But we also you know, help teach them how to use digital banking, support them with video banking services, and we can give them some education as well. So fraud and scams awareness, and you know, working on various adult education kind of programs in the community. So those are the main things. When it comes to financial capability, that's really where we've set our ambition and targets. So kind of coming on to target setting. So again, in line with our strategy, we have a target to support over 2 million customers to start saving between 2020 and 2023. And this is really in line with the UK national strategy set by the Money and Pension Services, and you know, looking at how can we get people saving little and often, and put the interventions there and get a savings culture behind us. So that was really important for us to set a target, and then to try and look at ways we can encourage savings behaviours. And the other one that we put in place was a target. Initially, we set a target of 2.5 million financial capability interactions in 2020. We've now stretched that target to 15 million between 2020 and 2023. And just to give you some context, at the Q3 results there, we had over 5 million interactions completed against our target for this year, 3.2 million. So we are exceeding that. And I think that's really, as the momentum grows across the bank and the business, and you know, they really kind of the people are getting behind this and finding the opportunities to embed this into the way that we have conversations with customers and support them. And the types of interventions that we cover are about providing knowledge and skills, but it's also about active engagement, and it's really trying to encourage a change in behaviour. And we do all of that through digital financial health checks. We have spending features in our app. We now have a Know My Credit Score feature, because that's really important for people to know where they are in the credit scoring system. We have products called Plan Ahead and a digital regular saver. So again, encouraging that regular saving habit. And as I say, we run fraud workshops. And the other program we have is Money Sense, which is our financial education in schools program. And it's absolutely fantastic. I had the pleasure of running that for a few years a little while back, and it's reached over 10 million young people. It's 27 years old, and it is, you know, when we filled in that survey, we'll be one of the 80 banks, you know, providing financial education, and one of the 32 trying to measure and monitor the effectiveness of that, working very closely with the education system here in the UK and specialist providers. So, you know, those are the real kind of interventions and actions we've taken. There's always more we can do, but that's currently where we're strategically focused.
Thank you so much, Jen. I think what becomes absolutely clear is that a social topic such as financial inclusion actually is quite complex to approach in terms of how to measure, what metrics to use, and also there's the difficulty that there's no international framework such as the Paris Climate Agreement as we have it for climate to align with. So that is work that actually you need to do within the region, within the bank. Very interesting to hear how you are approaching that topic. Thank you. I would move on to other impact areas that maybe are not so high on banks' agendas yet, but very likely will become higher on the agenda, and also areas that are quite important to really respond to the triple planetary crisis that we have at the moment, being climate change, but also nature and biodiversity loss and pollution and waste. Biodiversity especially is one to be emphasized here, which is still more nascent in banks' thinking and also approaches and methodologies. Now, Natalie, as BNP is a member of the TNFD task force, the Task Force for Nature-related Financial Disclosures, and one of the currently still few banks who have identified biodiversity as an impact area for themselves. I'd like to know how far biodiversity loss actually plays a role for BNP, and how you're approaching this task within your bank.
So contrary to climate change, for example, which is a topic we have been working on for years, biodiversity is a topic we had in mind for years, but where we have been kind of turning around because it's so complex and so diverse that we have been struggling a bit to really understand how we can handle it. And TNFD is part of the answer. We strongly believe that giving a framework to this topic will be helpful to everybody. Why it's complex? Because first, biodiversity can mean very different things in very different areas. Then science is not as advanced as climate science to define the biodiversity interaction into each ecosystem. So you have to have both a global view on biodiversity impact, but also being very specific and very local. Third, maybe we all have in mind ideas of biodiversity, endangered species, or I don't know, pollution on specific site, but it's very difficult to have a common understanding on what it is, mainly because we don't have any unit to define it. Contrary to ton of CO2 or ton of GHG for climate, there is no one single unit which can define biodiversity. So the way BNP Paribas sees biodiversity is really the beginning of a long journey. We know that we have to work on it, and we decided to put a lot of energy through TNFD, but also through internal tools in order to understand better. But we know it will be something in several steps. What we do today internally is try to identify for each industrial sector what are the key biodiversity topics. What should we ask our clients? What kind of discussion we will have? We are very conscious that we are not as advanced as on climate. We do not have benchmark in mind. For example, we do not have precise KPIs and average level to benchmark, but we know what are the main subjects. And we think also that we may learn from our clients when you are working, I don't know, on large infrastructure, you know what artificialization means and you know how you can handle that. When you are working on the agricultural sector, you really know what biodiversity means and what kind of impact it can have on your production. So the idea today is really to understand what kind of subject we have to discuss with our client, have the systematic discussion, begin to understand more and more precisely what kind of tool they develop, what kind of KPI they develop, then do our homework, try to understand what we can get organized at the bank level. Maybe we have to split that in several subjects. I touch a few some subject, but so artificialization, protection of forest and deforestation and fight against deforestation, sustainable agriculture. So we really hope that the CNFD will help us work with other banks and really understand other financial institutions, because we are not only banks, and really understand what kind of information we can give, which can be useful to assess the risk. Because we are really convinced that even though we don't talk as much as biodiversity risk as we do or as climate risk, it is a risk that can happen very quickly and can have a very strong impact, not only on ecosystem, but also on socioeconomic system. And we all probably have in mind the impact of biodiversity loss for specific communities. So here again, work in progress with two levels. One, which is more governance and political through TNFD, try to understand what kind of framework we can put together or what kind of framework we can contribute to. And another one, more internal, discussion with clients, discussion with academics to try to understand better what biodiversity means for each group of clients and try to build upon that a kind of common and global understanding on how we can improve and measure and have more discussion on the topic.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Yes, very, very, I'd say, long road ahead, and lots of work still to do, but it's great that you're leading the way and have already started to really go into these discussions. Another really, I'd say, rather nascent impact area for banks is the topic of resource efficiency, circular economy. That is a bit of a response to the third planetary crisis, pollution and waste. Shortly, UNIBFI will release a guidance document on resource efficiency and circular economy target setting, which Intesa Sao Paulo has contributed a lot, or still is contributing a lot. So Anna, the question to you is, what role does actually circular economy play for your bank or your bank's portfolio? And what aspects do you focus on within Intesa Sao Paulo? Or what does your approach towards circular economy look like, actually?
Yes, thank you, Diane. We started working on circular economy in 2015, and we was probably the only bank thinking about this topic. We started working immediately with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation because we found that was the real most important organization in the field, and we became in 2016 the first financial activities partner of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Since then, we started to create internally the right awareness on this topic, just to make all the colleagues and the leadership aware of the fact that this is a very important strategic new paradigm, new development paradigm. So something more powerful than how can I say, sustainability or ESG, in the sense that we think that, and not only we, of course, that we need a circular economy, so a new paradigm to tackle climate change, biodiversity, pollution. Is not enough to improve business as usual, to have targets that are connected to the business as it is now. We need a new kind of business. We need a regenerative business that can be completely different from the beginning. So this is the approach that we started to share internally, externally, to all the stakeholders, university, clients. And what we did in 2018 was to include the circular economy in the strategic plan, and we launched the year after a plafond, so a specific credit facility of 6 billion to finance companies for their innovative projects connected to circular economy. Of course, in that moment, we didn't have KPIs, criteria, common criteria or benchmarks. We still don't have benchmarks so far. So we worked with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in defining a sort of framework that we are using to assess the eligibility of the request to the plafond. The plafond, of course, is a credit facility which give a positive signal to companies. So there are sort of dedicated pricing, because we want to award those companies that are working in this direction, that share with us the same principle, the same vision, and that we consider less risky than other companies. So we must consider in a forward-looking vision the fact that business as usual is not the right way to do business. And so consolidated companies, those companies that are continuing to do business as they did before, are not those that probably will last long. So we are working a lot with startups, with innovative companies. We are trying to find interesting projects, try also to connect companies, to work on supply chains, because we think that only in a system we can change things, and also in systems with other banks. So it's very important to work together, trying to find together the way to support maybe also big projects if possible, but also going in every sector, because each sector could be impacted by circular economy innovation, and it's also important for us to share knowledge about KPIs, because of course we need it, but we also want to measure the impact of this kind of projects for companies. So we ask all companies to share with us some specific KPIs connected to that investment, to that project, so which is the positive impacts that they want to obtain. And in general, we are able through those KPIs to measure the impact of our circular portfolio. So this is a sort of starting point. Of course, we have already used the 6 billion available. In the next years, Intesa Sanpaolo is committed to dedicate around 80 billion euro to green projects and the circular economy. And so we want to work with the expertise we have created in the past years to promote even more this kind of paradigm, trying to let all the sector, the financial sector, that if we have to tackle biodiversity, climate change, pollution, we need to change the development model.
Thank you very much, Anna. Again, it becomes very clear business as usual, as you said, is no longer the way forward. There's a lot of rethinking required, and also a long way to go still, but really great to hear how far you are on that circular economy journey already. We're coming to the end of the session, but of course an outlook, and also maybe a look back, but also an outlook would be good to wrap up the session. When we have conducted the collective progress review, we identified, of course, a couple of common challenges on an individual level that the banks are facing. Number one challenge being data availability and also data quality. Number two challenge being quantifying impact and targets, very closely related to the data topic. My question to you would be, what other challenges do you see maybe on a collective level for the PRB framework, or also from your bank's perspective, yeah, maybe Ambika, you can go first.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. First of all, congratulations to all the 3 banks who are on the panel. It's really impressive to hear how you're tackling each of these topics. I think one of the challenges that it actually comes in is when you try to tackle all of these all together and come up with a prioritization. There are trade-offs in all of these decisions that you have to make, even if it's financial health and climate sometimes is the transition just, those types of things. And biodiversity sometimes can also come at the cost of climate and emissions. Circular as well. So, I think all these topics are interrelated. We only win when we win them all. The game is prioritization. How do you make sure that you do it in the right way? So the trade-offs are really a challenge that we need to tackle collectively as banks together. And also, of course, when we try to do this collectively, still keeping in context the geography and the size and, the other elements that make these banks different from each other. Here we are maybe pretty similar banks, but there are also smaller banks, regional banks, who may have a very different impact and outlook. So I would say those are maybe a couple of challenges that we should keep in mind as we move forward.
Move forward is the right word here. What would you recommend for other banks or for the future to move ahead? Maybe Jen.
Yeah. Hi. Yes, I think that the key thing is to take part. There's 200 banks now signed up, and as I said from the beginning, we really benefited from the guidance, the working groups, the collaboration, the global perspective, and that's all there for the taking. And I think it's not just about what can you get from PRB, but what can you bring as well. And we can all learn something, we can all share something. We all have unique experiences, and I think it's just about being honest about what's difficult and sharing it and trying to find a way through, because we are really ultimately all just trying to become more responsible in our banking, and we can only do that if we work together.
Thank you so much, Jen. We're coming to the end of the session. I think one important message that probably all of us would like to convey, that this is a process. It is a journey. Nobody is there yet in the beginning. Everybody is on that process, however far everybody is. And even if the topic is new, it still makes sense to approach it and then also shape that journey. And collectively, it might be a bit easier than walking that journey alone. So I hope, thank you to the audience for listening, first of all, and I hope you found the discussion and the insights from the bank fruitful and insightful for yourselves. If you would like to know more about the Principles for Responsible Framework, but also the collective progress that has been made, you can go to our website, unify.org, where you can also download the collective progress report. And also tune in to many of the other sessions that you can that are hosted at the European Regional Roundtable. There'll be a lot of interesting other sessions as well. So please let me wrap up by saying a big thank you to the 4 panelists, to the 4 banks here for sharing your expertise, your experiences, very insightful, and very much looking forward to move ahead on the next, say, 2 years implementation journey together with you. Thank you, everybody, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.